And we are live. I guess this is why I say welcome to my YouTube channel, or however
Yeah,
it is to start it formally.
mash that subscribe button, right?
Yes, smash the subscribe button. Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hi, Andrew. Hi, listeners. Good to have you on the first stream for this YouTube channel. And my name is Peter Mbanugo, and I'm from Nigeria, but I live in Munich, Germany. Joining me today is Andrew. Uh, we've known each other for some years now,
Hmm.
and Andrew has been like a mentor. He's been helpful in different ways to me, and I would leave the mic for him to do his introduction.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Peter. Yeah, it's fun to do this. It's been a little while since we talked, kind of synchronously, anyway. We chat a little bit in Slack and that kind of thing. But yeah, so yeah, I'm Andrew Hedges. I'm currently COO of Assistive Labs, which is a tiny little accessibility tooling startup. Also founder of the Collab Lab, which is a program that helps early career developers break into tech. I've been a web developer and engineering leader for over 25 years now, 26 years. So I've been doing this stuff a long time, and including spent a few years in the Bay Area. Worked for Dig and Disney and Apple when I was there. And the thing we're going to talk about today is a little stint, a little thing that I did at Apple, which I was thinking about this morning. Peter, is like, in light of the CrowdStrike thing that just happened.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel quite so bad about the thing I did. Like CrowdStrike. I was looking it up. It's like it cost just Fortune 500 companies like well over $5 billion,
Whoa,
and
that's a
like,
lot.
yeah, and that's not even like reputational damage, all that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure that the decision I made at Apple was like 1/100th of that at the most. So not as bad, but still pretty
Yeah,
bad.
I saw news today. I think Delta Airlines they were going to sue CrowdStrike
Yeah.
and Microsoft.
Uh-huh.
But I just don't get the relation. I thought it was mostly CrowdStrike faults. I'm not sure how Microsoft comes in play. Maybe because the
Yeah.
software comes by default.
Yeah, it's a good question. My understanding is that part of the problem there is that, or not the problem, but something, there was implications of a decision in the EU around 2008 or something like that. I might have the date wrong, but where they forced Microsoft to open up sort of a kernel level access to these antivirus tools. And so that's how these machines got into a loop where they were being forced to reboot before they ever could kind of like get into even safe mode or whatever. Or I don't know if that's true,
Mm.
but like that they wouldn't like boot successfully because this stuff was so low level. Whereas on like that same decision didn't apply to Linux and Mac, so they can kind of sandbox these tools a little bit more. Um, so it's like it's one of these things where it's like this implication, like this kind of thing that was well intentioned on the part of
Yeah,
the EU many years ago came back to kind of bite them recently. So
yeah. I can't imagine the intensity of the downtime that caused because I saw the news and a lot of
oh yeah,
flights were grounded. People were
yeah.
confused.
Oh,
I
I know. Yeah, I mean chaos, right?
Yeah. I never thought of airlines to have that kind of problem. I used to work a bit in with fintech back in Nigeria, and I
Mhm.
just imagine if some of servers services were going to go down and people can't purchase stuff, and like it was going to be quite very massive. Although I heard from a friend who worked with one of the, I think it's fintech solutions. They call them InterSwitch, and there was some incident and they lost like about millions or billions of naira then, probably because of some misconfiguration, and some
Mhm.
were recovered, some were not. So I if I was in that situation, I'll be very, very stressed.
Oh yeah.
And with that feeling, I never want to like work in fintech because It's like
Yeah.
fintech, or if you are in health, any very little mistake is very, very costly.
hmm Actually, so a neighbor of mine actually works for a local hospital here, and she said that yeah, all their systems went down. Like 30,000 computers within their company went down, but that hospitals have like everything's written down on paper, so they actually they
Yeah.
have fallback systems so that they can go back to. It's slower, but they're not as dependent on computers the way that airlines are for scheduling and like processing all the all the things that airlines do. So
Yeah, I think this is where computer paper saves us again. I
right.
think that's quite nice. I know here in Germany, there's still a lot done on paper. Like
uh-huh.
every legal stuff has to go be done on paper, and I think if they face such incidents, they'll be able to have a backup plan with the papers. But even most hospitals still have like papers they carry around and check your names and do stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, nice. I was curious. I know you've been worked at various companies. You've co-founded Assistive Labs, and
hmm
I'm curious what made you start at a company or join a company as a co-founder.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've always wanted to kind of I like being in charge. That's one thing, but uh, I've like I've tried to kind of like start my own things a few times, and when I've tried to do it by myself, it hasn't. I haven't ever been able to make it work. Like I'll do it for a little while, and like I get kind of bogged down in certain things. The times when I've been successful, and I've had a co-founder who was like a strong co-founder that where we complemented each other really well.
Yeah,
So like at Collab Lab, Stacy Taylor is just like a person who just gets things done. And I had kind of the original concept for Collab Lab, but that program really happened because she was just in there making things happen. Um, with Assistive Labs, I met Weston, my co-founder, when we were both working at Zapier, and then he and I ran into each other at an accessibility conference in Seattle end of 2019, and he told me what he had at that point left Zapier, and he told me a little bit about what he was working on then. And I always had an interest in accessibility, and it's like a firm belief in kind of the ideals of the web in terms of democratizing information, all that kind of stuff. So um, I started advising him on sort of the business side and kind of like how to scale up the business. And eventually, he invited me to come on as a co-founder, and we raised a little money, and then I joined. And yeah, it's been really really interesting because I mentioned I've been a web developer for forever, and in this role, I do almost nothing technical. I've had to like explore a bunch of different things that are kind of new to me. It feels like being in an MBA program and a law degree at the same time. Like I'm trying to like learning how to read an MSA. I'm learning how to do sales, like all these kinds of things that I've never had to do before. So it's been really interesting and a lot of fun.
so what's your day to day like now with being a manager?
Yeah, it's something different every day too. So it's a lot of variety. So I do like technically we have a couple of engineers who report to me. Although they take most of their direction from Weston on the engineering side, product side, but yeah, I mean, like yesterday, I was drafting contract terms for a big customer. Had a sales call. Uh, it's kind of, and then like working on like our quarterly newsletter. So doing like marketing. We did a kickoff with a designer for a kind of a brand refresh. Like it's just all it's like everything. I'm trying to take everything else that's not engineering and product off of the plate of Weston so that he can focus on that.
Yeah.
So it's just like whatever needs to happen. So SOC 2 compliance, like that's something that I take care of. So um, yeah, it's something different every day.
Oh, cool. That's interesting. You mentioned about how you try to start a few things in the past. Just
Yeah.
makes me think of myself.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're very entrepreneurial. Yeah.
Yeah, tried a few things. Didn't really work out, and now I'm more like in a very experimental mode. I don't know
hmm
like what would work. So each week I'm trying to figure out uh, like a new thing or a new approach towards my products. and then I also try to see what's trending, what could be a good market to play into, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I feel like also with a co-founder I would be able to go far, but I guess I haven't found the right match yet.
Mm-hmm.
So for
Yeah.
now, I'm still playing the Lone Ranger and doing a lot of learning. I'm not trying to make it like a I have to make it like I have to get to 20K MRR by next month. So I'm just taking my time to
Mm-hmm.
learn. And I figured that it's quite less about technical skills at the moment. And I
Mm-hmm.
have to skill up on like marketing and sales. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the areas I'm trying to grow more strength in.
Yeah, I mean, same. I've never been a salesperson, and I kind of didn't. I guess I didn't really appreciate how much goes into it. Like, there's a lot of strategy and tactics and things that are, a good salesperson. It's they know how to do, but it's like my problem with it has always been that it feels kind of dirty, kind of feels a little smarmy or something, to be too salesy.
Yeah.
But at Assistive Labs, like, I really believe in what we're doing. That helps. And then I'm trying really hard to take an approach where it's more about meeting people and, like, listening to the community as opposed to, like, going in, guns blazing, trying to hard sell people. Um,
Yeah.
'Cause especially in this industry too, like, people are very sensitive to vendors. So they're kind of wary of vendors because there are vendors in the accessibility space who make these outrageous claims that they can't back up. Like, one line of JavaScript will solve all your accessibility problems. It's like, no, that's not at all true. And in fact, those companies are getting sued and stuff for making those claims. So we try to be really cautious about that stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's just with accessibility. I think I've
Mm-hmm.
seen that with many software dev tools product as well. They make a lot of claims, and I feel like sometimes they do it to go viral,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them also try to push a particular pattern or ideology to you so that they can also sell you their
Yeah.
products. And yeah, it's just a balance, trying to make money, trying to do something good
Mm-hmm.
with your work. It's a balance. I know I got kicked out of a Reddit subreddit recently because after a while, they said, "Oh, this is too. Um, you're not allowed to do marketing on this channel because
Oh,
I
really? Oh,
promoted one of my products." So
ah.
yeah, but I'm going to figure out how to go about doing that right. So it's part of the
Yeah.
learning process.
Yeah. Right. For sure.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about random stuff. It's good to for the audience to know a bit about you, about us.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive right into the topic that brought us today to have this live stream, which is I started learning about. I got curious about CDNs. I think about 3 weeks ago or less.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of learning, I decided, okay, I think it would be better or faster to learn more if I talk to experts about CDNs, their benefits, and get them to answer different questions instead of keep sending them private messages. Maybe I can learn with people on the internet as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I decided to start this live stream. I don't know if I should call it a live stream or podcast or show. And
Yeah.
you shared your. I asked if you knew anyone, but you said, "Oh, you had an experience at Apple during one of the product launch where your team's work brought reduced Akamai's reliability to 97%, and that that was interesting. And I said, okay, let's get on live stream to talk about it and see
Yeah.
how it went. So, do you mind sharing a bit about the
Yeah.
incident?
Yeah. Sure. No problem. So I got my Apple T-shirt. I haven't worn this shirt in years, but I joined Apple in 2012. A couple years later, I was in the marketing communications group there, so um, responsible for Apple.com, basically all the product websites. I was one of 3 or 4 teams that were doing that kind of work. Um, and my team got tagged to build Apple's first foray into social at the time. Like, I mean, it's hard to believe now, but in 2014, Apple had never done anything on social networks. No Twitter or no Instagram, no whatever else, MySpace or anything else, nothing, right? So, and Apple, being Apple, didn't want to just like get onto somebody else's platform and do this stuff. So we, 6 weeks before the launch, so this is part of the problem. 6 weeks before the launch, my team was asked to build out this kind of social experience that would accompany the live stream for the product launch that included, this is September 2014. So iPhone 6, which at the time was kind of a big deal. The first launch of the Apple Watch. So that was a huge deal to Apple, like a brand new device that was launching. And that was also the launch where, for people who are old enough, remember that it was really this awkward thing where Apple pushed a U2 song to everybody's phone.
What?
The band U2.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like pushed a song from them onto everybody's phones, kind of without any warning or consent, and everyone got really upset. And like during the live stream, there were younger people who weren't really familiar with U2. It's like, oh, that's nice of Tim Cook to give these guys a chance or something. It's like U2 used to be the most famous band in the world, at one point, like in the 80s or something. Anyway, so anyway, all this stuff, like the launch was kind of a big deal. Apple's first foray into social. But my team was asked to do this, literally our first commit to the repo was 6 weeks before the thing launched. So 6 weeks before, and we're trying to build this thing from scratch, no frameworks to really build on and all that kind of stuff. And the design direction was pretty advanced, like these cool animations, like new cards, like it was all kind of card based, and these cards would flow in kind of in real time as things were being talked about on the live stream. So very coordinated with what Tim Cook and others were saying on stage, right? So my team, which I only had, I don't know, I had two main developers. I'm trying to think if I had other people on the project, but probably had a couple of other people working on it. We were, it's like 12, 16-hour days that we were working that entire time to make this thing happen. That launch too was pretty famous for. Now, this is not a problem that I caused, but the video stream failed over to a stream that was supposed to be internal only, like it wasn't supposed to be outside, and it was a Mandarin overdub of everything that was being said. It was like being translated in real time into Mandarin as an experiment, but it was never supposed to go public. And instead of failing over to the other English. Like they had, redundant systems. Instead of failing over to an English one, it failed over to the Mandarin. So everyone's listening to Mandarin. Like Tim Cook's on stage, and they're like, "What is going on? Like, why is it all in Mandarin?" So that problem wasn't caused by me. So there were multiple. This was kind of a cursed launch or something. But
was it Tim Cook at the time or Steve Jobs?
Yeah, it was Tim Cook. Yeah, I started after Steve died. So, yeah, but
yeah.
Anyway, so this, 6 weeks out, we're working like as much as we possibly can to make this thing happen. And this was kind of par for the course at Apple. Like you'd have whenever the launch was coming up, it was just, you lived at work, and, they're bringing meals in. And I literally a couple times had to sleep under my desk at Apple. So to work on stuff. Yeah. It was
no bed,
not
no
ideal.
cushion.
No, just like on the ground. No. That only happened once actually, but, anyway, so we have this thing going on, that live stream, part of the reason that it failed over and stuff is this was at the time the third biggest live stream that had ever happened on the internet. Like it's like the scale of it was like really huge, right? So that's all just to kind of set the stage of kind of like how important it was, what the scale was, all that kind of stuff. So my team was working on the front end for this experience, and there was another corresponding team that was working on the back end. And so they had a really smart architecture, honestly. They built a really simple CMS that had sort of time-based publishing that would basically just write a JSON file, a static file, to like, a server that then would get distributed out to Akamai's CDN. This is where the CDN comes in. So I don't know I don't know the actual numbers. I mean, Akamai must have at the time, 10 years ago, had 100,000 servers. Maybe I'm underestimating that, but worldwide,
Yeah.
all these servers, and they had a really good system for you push something up to Akamai, and then it gets distributed really quickly across the whole world, to all these servers that are very close to users, right? So, um, there's that kind of chart of latencies, right? Like the fastest thing is like an L2 cache or whatever. The second fastest is RAM,
Yeah.
then your hard disk, then network, right? Like and they're all orders of magnitude slower. So, one of the things that can increase latency is just if the server's in Cupertino and you're in Australia, like it's going to take longer to get there than if it's the server's also in Australia, right? That's just kind of so that's one of the ideas behind having all the stuff distributed. A, it distributes the load. B, it reduces the latency because you're closer. So,
And this was just for the JSON data, or like for the
yeah, it's just like a little JSON file that literally described what should be on the page at a time. So, we built a front end that would kind of take whatever was new from that JSON file and sort of like animate it in, so it's like at the top or whatever. And there's assets and things that are getting pushed as well. All the images and videos and things were already kind of up on the server. There were some that were coming in real time, but a lot of it was already cached and stuff. So the architecture was really smart. It would have been fine. However,
did
there's a
you
guy
did
who
you
comes.
did you drop the architecture?
No, that was the backend team. They're like, really smart way to do it. And actually, they were pushing that JSON file up to S3. So S3 is involved too. So and S3 is very scalable, right? Like,
Yeah.
highly available, highly scalable. And then from there, it was getting kind of distributed out to Akamai. So there was an S3 bucket.
So the backend team pushes to S3 bucket, and then Akamai picks it up with their CDN. And
Yeah, exactly.
but how do you at the front end know where to get the new JSON? Was there like some kind of notification?
We were polling. So
Okay.
and just I don't know if it was every 10 seconds or something, we were polling, right? And so, but you think like we had, I don't know how many millions of people all polling every 10 seconds
Yeah.
to get this
That's
file,
crazy.
right? So yeah, it was, I mean, third biggest live stream ever, right? So it's like, I mean, this is probably a conservative estimate, 100 million people all polling every 10 seconds. So, and that's the front end is controlling, when the polling happens and that kind of thing. So, all right. So that's all setting the stage. So, so the launch is on September 9th. September 8th, sleep deprived me and one of my developers is sitting at his computer being like, it's like the feed's not refreshing. Like it's not, why is it not refreshing? It's not like we know there are changes in the JSON, but it's like it's polling and it's not picking up the new changes. And so we're like, okay, it's kind of like for some reason the browser is aggressively caching this file more aggressively than it's supposed to be. Like it's supposed to have an expiry of 10 seconds. And so you poll and then you should see the new stuff. Like it should, it's kind of like work like that. So what do you do when the browser's caching something? You bust the cache. That's what you do, right? Turns out that's not what you do. So this is like at the time, I don't know, like I've been doing web development for a long time and I kind of understood caching, but I didn't know the difference between like e-tags and like other types of like expiries on these things, like, you know what I mean? So
which the CDNs uses as well to check when to fetch stuff.
Yeah, and it's all built into the protocols. It's like there are these mechanisms for caching and for stuff to expire, and like you have to fetch it again. And the browsers all do this stuff pretty reliably. I don't know what we were seeing. It seemed like at the time that the browser was somehow caching this thing more aggressively than it was supposed to. And so what I did was I talked to the developer about it and kind of like told him to add a query string to the request. And so, if you know how HTTP works, you add a query string to a resource, and that's a new resource. It's a different resource. So it's cached separately from the base resource or a different query string. And the thing that we added was a JavaScript timestamp. So now,
It's
yeah.
getting interesting.
So now instead of caching every 10 seconds, it's every millisecond, right? So that's what, 10,000 times faster that it's expiring than it was. So we're however many orders of magnitude, right? So now all of a sudden, so now we launch the thing. At first it's fine, and there's enough people on this that actually some people are getting a cached version of it. It's like you have 100 million people and they're all making these requests. Some of them are going to come in at the same millisecond,
Yeah.
but a lot of them aren't. And so what this causes, so in terms of a CDN, it's cached, it has expiries and stuff. Like as long as it's cached, the CDN will just serve it from disk, But if it's expired, the CDN is then going to go to the origin server for the file. So the origin server in this case was S3, and S3 is very scalable. So we didn't notice at first that this was a problem because S3 was handling the traffic. If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
Akamai was passing through almost all the requests back to S3, but S3 was keeping up for quite a while. But eventually S3 couldn't keep up. So we brought our S3 bucket down, which is hard to do.
And I was wondering, like, what happened to S3 in this situation, because also it's reheating the origin.
Yeah, so S3 was the origin server, and it started throwing 503s or whatever they were, like 500 errors. Like it's like a server error, can't keep up. So that starts getting passed through, like just passed through to the browser. And so you start seeing in the browser 500 errors. You're like, oh crap, what's going on? And then we start, kind of, and I literally not slept the night before. So people are like coming to me like, what's going on? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like I'm only here because of Diet Coke, like, like that's the only reason I'm awake right now. So anyway, we kind of like and then the backend manager is kind of like, oh, I see what's happening, and like there's these query strings on it. Like, how did that happen? I'm like, I don't know, yesterday, and so and so anyway, we eventually, so Akamai, yeah, is like they're degrading from their claim actually at the time was 100% uptime.
Oh, okay.
Or 100% like availability. And they were down. It was actually below 97. It was 96 point something. I have the number here.
I thought they just changed the availability to 100 recently, because I think Cloudflare was like 99 point something, and then they had an incident recently that brought a lot of services down. So I think they increased it to 100, and then if they had a longer downtime, you get like a refund or some credit back. So I never knew that.
So that's what started happening is like in the midst of all this, S3 and Akamai are billing Apple for bandwidth and like all this kind of stuff, probably millions of dollars. Akamai, because they're not meeting their service level agreements, all their customers now are owed millions of dollars, right? Because of they're not meeting their commitments. So this was a mess. I mean, it was really terrible. I honestly thought I was going to get fired, and I thought the director of engineering was going to get fired too. I mean, we were both like, I guess that's it. It's been nice working with you. Like honestly, and so like
you send
after
out
being up for right, like get your resume, get the resume like kind of tidied up. Anyway, so like after being up for 36 hours, like I went home, collapsed, and then like I took I think 2 days off. I was like just wandering the beach. I don't know, like it was like just like in a daze, and I didn't get fired to their credit, which they realized that they had put my team in a really like pretty untenable situation and me and stuff. So we didn't get fired, which was pretty lucky. And they actually then allowed us to kind of re-architect the front end and stuff to. I mean, not surprisingly, it worked once we weren't adding a query string, but like to kind of redo it right, like we all got training Scrum, and we kind of like did like more of a proper process, and the next launch went off without a hitch and stuff. The first launch probably would have gone off without a hitch if it hadn't been for the query string, honestly. But
so you had a relaunch for the same product?
Yeah, we did Apple Live, I think 3 times before they canned it, and they just like, oh, just use Twitter like everybody else, but yeah, the second one was really smooth, and then the third one they did it, and they're like, yeah, we're kind of over this. We're just use other social platforms, instead of trying to drive people to this bespoke experience. But
Yeah. And so I'm curious for Akamai, didn't they notice something was happening
oh yeah,
and did they
immediately
reach out?
they're talking to our people, and our people are like, I don't know what's happening. Like there was all this communication happening. I mean, this is I mean, the launch, one of these events is maybe an hour and a half or something, right?
Yeah.
And like maybe half an hour into it, it's like, oh crap, the shit's hitting the fan, and so everybody's talking to each other and trying to figure out what's going on, and like what do we do to fix it, and like, if we do this, how long is it going to take to kind of get things under control? Like all those things were happening, and like I was in the middle of some of those conversations, and but a lot of the ones about this, like there were people who were more kind of like in the servers who were like just like trying to mitigate stuff and whatever. So yeah, it was chaos.
I can't imagine. I'm just trying to imagine like the cost of the bill, because you have Akamai with the bandwidth and requests, and then you have S3, like which is known, AWS is known for their pricing, and you
Uh-huh.
are hitting it all the time. It's like that's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of bill.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I assume it's in the millions of dollars, but I have no idea actually. Um,
Yeah, but then in the end, you just had time to rebuild and better implement the situation.
yeah, I mean, we pushed a fix to the front end that didn't have the query string on it. Basically, I mean, that was really the fix. And eventually, like people were getting errors, so they were reloading the page. So if they reloaded the page, they would get the new version that would not bring all the servers down. So eventually, it started kind of calming down. But
Yeah.
there were some people who just kind of left the page. They were like, I don't know why it's not feeding in new cards, but I'm still seeing the live stream, so I'll just watch it, right? So there were some people who they were still kind of hitting the origin server a lot and stuff, but at that point, S3 could keep up. Akamai was caching most of the requests. Like it kind of got back under control fairly quickly, but for a little while there, yeah, it was pretty dire. I think it was 96.6% is what their global availability dipped to.
And how did you see this data? Or did they have it publicly, or
I
they made
saw
an announcement?
somebody I think did an analysis, or like the people that just kind of watch the network and stuff for these kind of things, and
Yeah.
so I've actually found like kind of a chart. So I have a URL of slides I did from a presentation on this a few years ago. Um, is that going to come through to the YouTube chat? I can post it over there too. I don't know.
You can. I think
And
you can. You mean you want to do a screen share?
no, that's right. I just posted a link to my slides that has the slide 38 has a little chart on it,
Okay.
with like some other CDNs and stuff, and kind of what their availability was on that day at that time. So you can kind of see where Akamai, the big dip, around when this was happening. But
Now, should I share it on the live stream?
I don't know if people want to look at the slides, they can. It's yeah, there's a bunch more kind of like of things that I've talked about in there as well. One of the things about being on that stage, if you want to call it that, when this all happened, the Mandarin overdub thing, and then this like our the live stream, or the kind of that Apple Live experience not working, Samsung immediately picked it up and like ran ads mocking the event, and it's just like, oh, it's like so bad. Like you don't want to be the
Yeah.
person who caused that to happen. Not a
But
great feeling.
I'm surprised Steve team didn't come down to check what's happening.
Tim
Or
was a little
maybe
busy. He was on stage. He was, but our VP, the VP of Marcom, was definitely like, "What in the world?" And then this was actually kind of funny because one of my engineers and I had literally been up for 36 hours, something like 40 hours, I don't know. And the VP comes and like sits at the desk while we make like one last like hours after the event was over, like sat there while he watched us kind of make this little change to something, and I was just like, really, can we just go home, go to sleep? Like this whole thing it's over. Like,
Yeah.
and then later he kind of like, yeah, and then afterwards we were kind of hacking stuff, and it's like, you were sitting there while we did some work. I mean, that's what happened. Anyway.
Yeah. Quite interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if, I mean, it's nice to build softwares, but sometimes I feel like some situation can be very, very stressful, and you feel like just not caring at all because you know, having to work 6 weeks before the launch with
Yeah.
some sleepless nights, and then something goes chaotic during that
Hmm.
time, and most likely you're very stressed, and you are not in like the best shape possible to figure things
Yeah,
out.
exactly. Yeah. So in my presentation, the slides that I shared, like one of the points I was trying to make is that having a decision framework kind of in advance, like knowing how to make good decisions in a stressful situation is helpful. And there's like at the time I had kind of a decision framework that turned out not to be very helpful. It was called the OODA loop. So it's observe, orient, decide, act. It's like this loop that fighter pilots used to use, or maybe they still do.
Can
Like
you
when they're
repeat?
like in a so OODA, OODA. So
Okay.
it's an acronym for observe, orient, decide, act. And as soon as you act, you go back into observe mode and you kind of do this loop. And you stay in this loop and it allows you to make decent decisions really quickly, right? But that's not the same as like in this situation, that wasn't the framework I should have been using, but it's kind of what I had in my toolbox at the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are better ways. So I talk in the slides a little bit about this other framework called DAISY, but it doesn't matter kind of what the framework is. It's there are things around like you know the greater the impact of the decision, the more people you should involve in the decision. Like there are like kind of things that you should kind of keep in mind when you're doing these things, and like the riskier it is, the more careful you should be, basically. So in this case, like I didn't realize the risk, and that was kind of a little bit of ignorance on my part about how CDNs work, honestly. Um, but if I had recognized the risk, I would have pulled in the manager, the person who kind of architected the back end for the system, and said like, "Is this what we should do, or what do you think of this idea?" And they would have been like, "Oh no, 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 that's terrible." Like instantly, it would have been like, "No, no, let's figure out what else could be causing this." But the day before the launch, all this pressure, or like it's not refreshing. Let's make a decision quickly and move on. That's what we did. Not the greatest way to approach it. It turned out in hindsight.
Yeah. But then would there not be like a side effect of the approach to managing the situation in terms of having to pull in different people to make the decision? Maybe let's say it involves like three other teams, and then you have to
Mm-hmm.
agree. Would it be harder to agree when you have three more voices to talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. But in a way, that's sort of the point. Like if the if the decision is riskier, you need to take more time and be more considerate about the decision, right? That's kind of the point of it. Is so if it's something that's sort of inconsequential, like, oh, should there be a drop shadow on this box? Like, yeah, just make the decision. Boom, we're moving on. But if it's something where it's like this could have implications for the scalability of the thing, it's like, well, we should probably talk to the team that architected how it's going to be scalable. Like in hindsight, it seems kind of obvious, right? In the moment, it was tough to see that, and not recognizing sort of the risk involved in busting the cache that aggressively. If we had made it every second, we might not have ever even noticed it. But it was every millisecond, and so it was just like bringing servers down left and right. So
Yeah, and giving some money to AWS.
oh yeah, and Akamai, yeah, for sure. Um, but somebody very generously was like, "Oh, it's the most expensive training you'll ever have." Like, it's obviously it's
Yeah,
like clearly a lesson that I will never forget. I know a lot more about how these things work than I did before, but I do wish it hadn't happened.
yeah. But then again, you learn from it.
Yeah,
Maybe
right.
if it hadn't happened, you probably wouldn't have changed your decision making framework.
Yeah, right. I'd still be OODA looping all over the place and making mistakes. So
Yeah, cool, cool, cool. Uh, I'm curious how it was like for you at Apple, like looking at Apple's kind of company, how big they are. How how did you manage to coordinate, like with your own team, with other teams, on
Mhm.
releasing this product or feature and going live on launch day?
yeah, Apple's a funny place because it's so big, and in a lot of ways, different groups kind of almost act as their own companies or startups, even sometimes within the company. Um, there was really interesting. So one of the things a lot of people do when they get to Apple, most people do. I don't know everybody. I don't know if everybody does it. There's Apple University is kind of an internal training thing that you can do, and one of the classes is basically like what makes Apple Apple. And so you take this class and you kind of learn about the history of how the company is structured and all that stuff. And one of the things that Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple was he very purposely structured all the corporate side. Retail is separate, but all the corporate side of the company under a single profit and loss statement. And that sounds kind of like why does that matter? But as a contrast, right before Apple, I was at Disney, where every little business unit had its own profit and loss statement. And so what that did is it kind of incentivized that business unit to be profitable, but it also created a barrier between you and other groups. Where if you help somebody in a different group, it's kind of taking away from your own P&L in order to help them, right? So it kind of disincentivizes collaboration. Whereas at Apple, people were deeply expert in their thing, but they were very ready to kind of like share knowledge and like help people across groups because it doesn't it's one P&L, if that makes sense. So in that sense, Apple's really good, or when I was there anyway. I don't know how things are now, but when I was there, Apple was really good at collaborating. People at Apple, if you could find them. So, like there's a company directory. So, but you'd be like, oh, I need to, there's this thing going on with WebKit, but I have no idea who works on that. You can't just look it up. You have to kind of like know somebody who knows somebody on the WebKit team. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's so and so, and then you message them, and they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'm happy to talk to you. But if you can find them.
Yeah,
Now within Marcom, obviously, I knew the other engineering managers. So like we were coordinating on the launch of this thing, and like I said, they came up with a smart architecture. My team screwed it up. Mostly the experience was amazing. I screwed it up really by this stupid decision. But the launch of it and everything, like it was stressful. It was like fast paced and like all this stuff to get it out. Like it for the most part, we probably would have pulled it off. But it was typical of how we launch stuff for these types of things. My first big launch was in 2013. The Mac Pro site that had the kind of Darth Vader site, the like all black, and like it had the top came off that round Mac Pro, if you remember that site.
no, I
That's
wasn't.
You don't remember that site? Oh, it was super innovative at the time, and everyone started copying it, and then Apple immediately was like, "Oh, we don't like that interaction model." But anyway,
At that point, I was still a Windows person.
oh, okay, all right. Well, that's a whole different discussion. But that site that site launched at 4:30 in the morning, or got QA approved 4:30 in the morning the day of the product launch. So that's a little stressful. Like, you know what I mean? Like this is just kind
Yeah,
of how it worked. That was actually the launch where I slept under my desk, where like we're like frantically just trying to like pray that QA signs off on this thing. Launched with a bunch of bugs that we knew about, and we just like tried to fix some of them and stuff. But it was just like that's just how it went. Like you have these massive launches. Tim Cook's getting up on stage, whether the website's ready or not. So you're just there, just doing everything you possibly can to like make
yeah,
it as good as possible before he steps on stage.
yeah.
It's
Quite
definitely a
interesting.
pretty unique environment.
Yeah, quite interesting. I think my worst kind of launch has been where I had sleepless night, launched, and then there was no users.
Oh, yeah, kind of the opposite problem. Yeah, you didn't bring any
So
servers down.
no servers. I just brought my Emotions down.
Right. That's
Yeah,
funny.
but I'm wondering how is it different now with assistive labs? Have you done launches, and how do you do it now?
No, I mean, our it's a totally different kind of thing. Like we're partly a SaaS product, so we have a live testing platform, and we have a kind of a steady stream of new users coming in on that product. But our system, we keep, we do an operational review every week. This might be interesting to you. Is every week we get on a call, synchronous call. And we have a list of metrics that we go through and we look at. And we like look at the charts, and or every 2 weeks, sorry, um, and just see if there are any kind of anomalies, like unusual spikes or something that used to be noisy that's now flat. Like we kind of like try to um, just look at those things and understand the systems, how they're working. So every so often we'll find something kind of interesting. We'll dig in and um, maybe somebody's trying to like do like blockchain mining on our Bitcoin mining on our VMs or something. So like we can kind of detect some of these things. Um, but for the most part, like we keep an eye on those metrics, and we bump up our cloud spend a little bit whenever we need to. Um, the other side of what we do is more of a services thing. So it's scalability is honestly not much of an issue over there. A little bit in terms of like we have an end-to-end testing thing that we do. So there is some scalability stuff that we need to pay attention to in terms of being able to run tests in parallel.
Yeah,
And all the tests run on actual VMs, and so it is fairly computationally expensive and stuff, but um, it's all very predictable. So in that way, it's pretty nice. There's none of this kind of spikiness like we had at Apple.
but it's quite a small company, so it's different.
Oh sure, yeah, yeah. And yeah, we have I don't know how many users, but even thousands of users as opposed to
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of people trying to hit the website. So
Oh, nice. Maybe I'm going to come back to you weeks in some weeks time to ask some business question if I've got any. I think
okay,
all
yeah,
the while we've all mostly talked about tech and
uh-huh,
maybe team management. So now I think
yeah, sure.
I can discuss business with you.
That sounds good. I mean, I'm just kind of learning all this stuff in real time myself. So um, but I'm more than happy to share whatever I've learned, mistakes I've made, honestly, more than anything.
Yeah, cool. Let me see if there's any questions from the live
Oh
stream.
yeah.
Uh, and someone says he blames the quality assurance team for what happened, but I guess there was no quality assurance at Apple then.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because no, there was we had armies of QA people at Apple, but the thing is that it's a very particular problem. They wouldn't have detected
Yeah,
it unless they were kind of looking at the console, looking at network requests. On a small scale, it worked fine. So they would have been checking it and be like, okay, looks good.
yeah. Someone says they didn't know S3 can be brought down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everything can be brought down if you really try, I guess.
yeah. I'm just curious if it was down like no capacity, or if it was just rate limited, or just curious. Would be interesting if that happens.
Oh, that's actually a good distinction. And I don't know. I mean, and it was just that one S3 bucket, which at some point it does get down to physical servers, right? So
Yeah. W-
um,
Wouldn't it
yeah,
have detected as like a some kind of DOS attack? Probably.
that's possible too. It was sending 500 errors, which makes me think the server just couldn't keep up,
Yeah,
um,
probably.
as opposed to
Why?
some kind of like
Or
prohibited kind of thing.
maybe they don't care because the more they keep giving you more servers and 500. I mean, even for 500 errors, S3 charges you. So
Yeah, yeah. I think it's by request, right? It's not by
yeah.
successful request. So.
I wonder if it's possible to cache 500 errors. I think it's possible. I was playing around with Apache Traffic Server recently, and I think you can configure if you should cache negative like requests, so non 200 requests. So it's
Hmm.
like 500, and then you can set the limit. So probably if in that case this happened, you could also
Uh-huh.
have been trying to purge your CDN of 500 errors globally, and that would be another problem
Yeah.
to add to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a
Yeah,
lot of problems.
yeah, scary issues. Uh,
Yeah.
it's been fun chatting with you. I think we can start wrapping up a bit.
Hmm.
Um we've learned about your experience, what you learned from it, um, your design framework now. I think I'll
Hmm.
also be more sensitive for this kind of launch if I'm in that kind of situation. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, really, it's like, it comes down to, like, people have limits in terms of like what their endurance, and like what, the decision making that they do degrades a lot if they haven't slept. It's like, it's kind of
yeah,
basic stuff in some ways.
yeah.
Um, so
Sleep is important.
that's right. That's the lesson here.
Yeah. So we will wrap up now. A few final questions for us to wrap up. Would like what kind of tools do you use for your work recently? Like what kind of tools? Laptop, maybe setup, productivity tools.
Yeah. I mean, I work on a Mac. Not surprisingly, I haven't worked at Apple, but um, yeah. I mean, my work. I mean, I use VS Code, and we use GitHub, and a lot of Slack, a lot of standard tools, Google Workspace. Like, we try to keep those things relatively simple. It's kind of standard. Um, I use Bear for note taking, which is just like a Mac app that it's really lightweight and kind of fast for note taking. Um, I don't know. I mean, like, our service is built on GCP, on Google Cloud, and we use Stripe for payment processing. So again, just and we deploy to Vercel. So it's like we try to keep the tools just like modern and standard, and we have TypeScript and React and stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
it's kind of boring in a way, right? But I actually like a lot. Um, I like that there's kind of a body of knowledge built up around these things, and it's there aren't a lot of surprises. We're not trying to. That's not the value proposition, is being using some cutting edge framework, right? Like, it's not that's not necessary for what we're doing. So we try to focus on the unique stuff that our company does.
yeah, cool. I think many front end developers these days use Vercel for their product.
Hmm.
Although I do see a trend now with people going the $5 VPS self-hosting options with
Oh
all
yeah.
the with all the rave about Vercel charging you so much.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's worth it for us to have that kind of reliability. Like, we have our own SLAs and stuff for our customers, and we
Mhm.
don't want to have to be we don't want to break those things because of, like, our providers, our vendors, right? So, GCP is very reliable, Vercel is very reliable, Stripe's very reliable, and you put those things together, and it's like we're not going down because of that. That almost never happens. So.
No, there's a question. Someone says, "Do you only use GCP and Vercel? Would you ever use a CDN in front of Vercel?"
Yeah, if we were doing things at a certain scale, yeah, we definitely would uh, put some of that stuff on a CDN. I guess Vercel has their own CDN for
Yeah.
static assets, I think, right? So in some ways, we're just kind of piggybacking off of that. Our stuff is just not at this kind of scale where we would need Akamai or Cloudflare or some kind of
Yeah.
maybe Cloudflare for, like, you know denial of service attacks and that kind of thing.
I think those are all built in into Vercel. I think since they have their own CDN and also I think firewall rules. Because
Hmm.
I'm guessing they are either using maybe Fastly or Cloudflare as the CDN layer. So probably they have this configuration on the CDN layer. So, but I'm not super sure if they run their CDN on top of Cloudflare. But I wouldn't. I don't think I would use CDN in front of Vercel. I think that might cause issues because I think there are some site like Hashnode uh, that runs on Vercel. When you configure a custom domain and you allow it to proxy through Cloudflare, you just keep getting an infinite redirect. So, and I think
Oh,
it's
great.
because they are running on Cloudflare, and it
And
does
these things are all
keep.
it all depends on what you're doing too, right? Like, if you're doing a dynamic logged in experience or something like that, that's
Yeah,
very different from serving a static site. So
Yeah.
at Apple, most of the stuff was static, and so you just put it up on a CDN, and that's all. That's the end of it, right? But if you're doing a logged in thing, then you can't cache it in the same way, or you can only cache certain static assets, blah blah blah. So it all depends. It's like everything in programming; it all depends.
Yeah. Where can users or listeners find you on the internet or connect with you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah,
Lab.
I mean, here I'll put a couple things in the chat. So there's Assistive Labs. That's a company, and then I'm basically I pronounce that Sigda, but that's my handle on most social networks. So I'm on Twitter with that, and Instagram, and different things. So
Yeah. So your handle on Twitter, Instagram. Cool. Any final words before we round this off?
Let's see. If you're doing something risky, get sleep and talk to other people about your decisions. That's what it comes down to, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like my siesta, so sleep very important. All
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
See
Cool.
you later, listeners.
All right.
Have a
Yeah, thanks for
wonderful
having me
evening.
on.
Welcome.